Hello, and we're live. Good evening, and welcome to our virtual presentation of The Committed, a memoir of madness in the family with author Paolina Milana and moderator Brenda Gazzar. This event includes an audience Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button directly below the viewer's screen. You should be able to vote for any questions you'd like, and they'll make their way to the very top of the list. Also, please consider supporting our bookstore by purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book. Just click on the green purchase button, and it will take you directly to our website where you can complete your purchase. Vroman's Bookstore is the oldest independent bookstore in Southern California. We are almost 128 years old. So it's thanks to generous patrons like yourselves that keep our lights on. So every bit of support goes a very long way. So with that said, let me briefly introduce our speakers for tonight, and then we can get started. So Paolina Milana is a former journalist and turned marketing, PR, and media pro. She currently serves as a court-appointed special advocate for children in foster care. Her memoir, The S Word, was named one of BuzzFeed's 5 best memoirs of the moment and received the National Indie Excellence Award. And joining her tonight is Brenda Gazzar. Brenda is a multilingual multimedia reporter who has worked for a variety of news outlets in California and in the Middle East since 2000. In addition to the Los Angeles Daily News, her work has been published by Reuters, the Denver Post, Miss Magazine, the Jerusalem Post, USA Today, and many more. So with that said, let me bring our speakers full screen. All right, enjoy the talk, everyone.
Thank you, Rira.
Thank you.
So,
Hello.
Paolina, hello.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you. Thank you for doing this.
Of course.
Yeah.
I wouldn't miss it.
Yes.
We're actually here at the edge of the Angeles National Forest in Paolina's home.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Blueberry Hill Cottage, and we have our red wine with us.
Yes, as we should
Toast.
But I'm not drinking any until a little later because you didn't come to see a dance show, and that's what would happen. So,
all right. So you just came out with your book, Committed, a memoir of madness in the family 2 days ago. Congratulations.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's very, very exciting. Labor of love.
Yeah, I bet. I'm going to talk a little bit about the book, and then we'll get into questions.
Okay.
So Committed is about your time as a college student at Iowa State University, trying your best to be quote unquote normal while keeping the madness in your family, in your Sicilian American family, at bay. And they were in Skokie at the time. It highlights your experiences with your mother, Maria, who was diagnosed with schizophrenia at the age of 52, and your sister, who was diagnosed with the same mental illness in her mid-20s. And all this is happening as you're struggling with your weight and with figuring out how to pay for your tuition in college. And also as you grapple with the voices in your head and wondering if those voices are normal or not.
Very true. Very true.
Okay, great. So what compelled you to write this memoir, Committed?
Okay, so that's a great starter. First off, a great recap to the book. So clearly she read it. This is good. But what compelled me? I would have to say, for anyone out there who has had a past that that has been challenging, you think to yourself, why? There's got to be a reason, right? I mean, everything has a reason. Maybe we'll never know what it is. But in my case, I just thought to myself, there is no way that I went through all of this, that my family had insanity in its family tree and its DNA for it not to have a greater meaning. So I wanted to tell the story. And the first book, The S Word, which published in 2015, I'll be honest, when that book was being worked on, and it took me about 10 years to do it, that book was very its intent was to be a tell-all. Its intent was to kind of shine a light on all of the adults, all of the authority figures who during my childhood probably didn't make great choices. And so I was going to point a finger. And in the 10 years it took me to write it, I evolved. I healed my own kind of wounds, and it became a book of forgiveness and redemption and hope. This book, which is what, how many years, 2015 to now is what, 6 years later. This book took a lot less time. It's my fourth book. So myself just kind of learning kind of like the shortcuts. But this book, I really wanted to give a voice to my mom, my sister, my dad, the people who are featured in the book through their actual letters. So this book obviously continues the story with my mom, my sister, but it does so in a way to give others a voice who aren't here any longer. So it's kind of like a family memoir. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Thank you. What would you say the underlying theme of Committed is? What were you, the narrator, searching for during this time in your life?
I think the underlying theme of Committed and what I was searching for was a desire to be normal, back then. So my whole goal was to be normal. My whole goal back then was not to, quote unquote, catch schizophrenia, right? I lived in a great deal of fear that schizophrenia would choose me as its next, kind of victim. I never did really think through how I would feel when it chose my little sister. That was kind of heartbreaking, a bit of a shock. But I would say in terms of the theme that is throughout this book, it has to do with questioning what is normal, questioning what is crazy, and really shining a light on the fact that at any given moment, depending on our circumstances, any one of us could go down a bunny hole, could, become a little crazy based on our situation. Look what's happening with the pandemic, right? And everything that's going on in the world today. Every one of us has that craziness in us, both at a good level and maybe not so good level. So that's it. And the other thing that I also wanted to bring out in this book, when someone has a mental illness, when we are caregivers of people who have a mental illness, there's the tendency to not really take care of ourselves. You're so focused on what you need to do for someone else. And I think it was hugely important to me to let people know that the worst thing you can do is not practice self-care, because you deplete your resources and then you don't make great decisions and you are not at your best to help someone else.
Yeah, thank you for that. That leads nicely into our next question.
Okay.
In the prologue.
And she wouldn't tell me these questions ahead of time. So just so you know.
That's right. It's the journalist in us. In the prologue, you say, insanity had taken root in my family tree, and I was tasked with tending our garden. Mm-hmm. You also mention in the book that you were called the Piccola Mama. I'm not sure how to say that.
Piccola Mama.
Piccola Mama.
Mm-hmm. Little mother.
Thank you. By your father, by the time you were, I think, 10.
10.
Wow. What was it like being the caretaker of your mother and your younger sister from such a young age?
So, truth, being la piccola mama when you are daddy's little girl and looking for approval and you love your dad and he is favoring you because of all the things you do because mom can't, there's a tremendous amount of power that comes with that feeling that you are extra special. You don't realize at that age, you're supposed to just be a kid. You're not supposed to be the caregiver. You're not supposed to be the mom. You're not supposed to be any of that. So I think, in the beginning, it was a bit of a power surge. When my mom, when her illness escalated and I kind of came into her crosshairs, it it wasn't so much fun anymore. It was a big challenge. And the more that time went on, and that it wasn't an illness that was done and over. It wasn't a broken bone that we got it, fixed. She had a cast, and then it was stronger than it was before when it healed. It wasn't, God forbid, it wasn't a cancer or something where either, the treatment cures you or you go in remission, or cancer is your end. There is kind of no end, not due to the illness, and there is no cookie cutter treatment. So the longer that it went on, the more we fell into despair, the more that, my father was selling things to pay the mortgage, and we didn't have insurance at that time. So just, we were first generation Sicilian American. We're trying to figure out if it's first or second, but my parents are from Sicily. English not first language for us. So, at that time, it was great when it started and you are counted on, you have an identity, you're an important role. But then as it went on, it was something I really didn't want anymore. The more that I became my own person, when you're a teenager, you want to do your own thing, the more difficult it was to realize that I was living this life of obligation. When I come home from college and my father unexpectedly dies, and then my little sister 2 years later explodes in a psychotic episode, and I end up having to commit her to a psych ward. That's when reality just hit me in the face, and I was convinced this was my fate in life. It was reluctant caregiver at that point. And keeping it all secret from the outside world, it did damage. It did.
Why did you keep it secret from the outside world?
So in the beginning, with my mom and stuff, we kept it secret because a couple of reasons. One, there's this huge stigma of mental illness. Nobody understood it, not even the medical profession. My mother had a couple of exploratory brain surgeries because she got it so late, or it manifested itself so late. She was in her 50s. They didn't think that's what it was. They thought it was physical. So imagine you're going down this road and you think it's one way, then you find out that it's a mental issue. And at that time, the only thing that we saw really about mental illness were shows like Sybil. I don't know how many of you remember the show Sybil, which was incredibly scary. Or you'd see, horror flicks where the person had a mental illness. Or in the news, you would see someone like, I still remember seeing Lori Dan. She was someone near our hometown in Illinois who just went in and shot up a school. This is way back when. And every time that something like that would happen, you wanted to keep it quiet that you had that in your family because there was such a stigma attached to it. Plus, being Sicilian, there's kind of like an unwritten code of La Cosa Nostra. What happens in the family stays in the family. And I know that that's not exclusive to the Sicilian culture or even the Italian culture. I think every one of us, even today, it is still something that you don't want to just announce to the world. And that is a shame, because the more that we keep it quiet, the more that we kind of approach it as if it's something shameful and we don't want people to know about it, the more that just perpetuates us not getting the information and not feeling safe enough to even reach out to get help. One of my goals is really to change the narrative when it comes to mental illness, so that there is more comfort in talking about it, no matter at what level, and no matter what thoughts you're having. I was telling you, I was interviewed by a media personality recently about the book, and she was telling me all of a sudden that she too had a brother who had a mental illness, and that my book gave her permission to feel the feelings she was having. Both loving that person and, hating that person at times. So making it okay to not be okay is really key. And making it okay to be okay, because it's almost like survivor guilt. If my little sister, because she got the schizophrenic genes, you feel as if, oh my gosh, I can't, I shouldn't be successful. I shouldn't, get married because, she can't, some people think, oh, I can't have kids because, which is one of the things I had thought, but anyway, I'm going on and on.
Great. No, really good. I just wanted to point out a lot of this is happening in the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a different era as well.
Very big.
Yeah.
Very different era, and yet eerily still the same.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I agree. Thank you so much. So Mother's Day is Sunday.
Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there, or all those who serve in mothering roles. How's that?
Beautiful. Yes. I wanted, before we go there, can you just talk about a psychotic episode? And for those that aren't familiar with what that looks like, if you can maybe describe the scene of a psychotic episode that you mentioned in Committed.
Sure. So, I think I'll choose the one of my little sister. So my little sister, she had always been shy. She had always been, a little bit behind, one of those kids who needed an extra class, a tutor, or something like that. She kind of fell through the cracks, to be honest, because of everything we were focused on with my mom. So, and that's a shame. Vinny, and that was her name, Minchinzina. She was super lonely, and her psychotic break came when, my father had died. We really didn't talk about it much. The entire family just kind of splintered. Everyone grieved in their own way. There was a moment when I got a chance with a friend to go away for a week on a cruise. And ironically, it was over Mother's Day. And my mom was like, yes, you can go, that's fine with me. So I go. Right before I'm ready to leave, my little sister wants to talk to me. And I'm done. I'm like, I'm going. I need to make it to the airport. You're trying to stop me. Just leave me alone. I just want to be alone. I want to go and have fun. I go. I come back 7 days later, and I have the time of my life on that cruise, much in part because of my friend who knew how to have a good time. It was awesome. Come back, and as I step into the doorway, my mother says to me, there's something very wrong with Vinny. And I'm thinking, what does that mean? My little sister comes to the top of the stairs and announces that she's getting married. And I'm like, whoa, wait, what's happening? You're getting married? And then just kind of explodes with, why do you think I can't get married? Like just strange chatter. She then goes to the phone, calls this individual up to prove it to me. The individual's father answers the phone, and I hear screaming. I pick up the extension. In those days, you only had 2 phones in your house, right? An extension, no cell phones. I pick up the extension, and I hear him say to her, I'm calling the police. You're threatening my son, all this stuff. And I intervene. And I say, clearly my sister is not well. She hears this, completely becomes unhinged, and threatens me to the point where I really do think that she would be capable of harming me in a major way. She runs out the door. We kind of go after her. And when we do, she has flyers in her hands that she has gotten from the church, from, a nearby kind of shopping mall that we were, that was close to the house. And she is telling us, don't you see? Look, there's my picture. There's this guy's picture. Aren't they beautiful? They have everything written about our wedding. What's the matter with you? and then starts talking in the car to her other bridesmaids who aren't there, obviously. So we go I had called the emergency room at the local hospital. They said to bring her in. We brought her in, and they immediately, I ended up committing her. They immediately put her in what's called the quiet room, which is a rubber room, right? I mean, it has cameras. And then, we watched, and she was screaming at no one there, then laughing, and then, begging to be let out. And there's your psychotic break.
Great, thank you. So as you're writing Committed, what revelations did you have about Vinny and your mom?
That's a great question. So the revelations that I had, it dawned on me that I, like so many people, kind of put people with a mental illness or really any disability, maybe, in a bucket, like over there, right? That's them, right? And I think what I kind of learned as I was writing this is how much I missed out on because I treated them both, viewed them both as their mental illness, as their illness. That's it, as their disability, not realizing that just like someone who has a physical disability, they have some physical disability. It doesn't mean that everything about them is disabled, right? So just as in this case, my mom and my little sister, they had incredible talents. I mean, my mother was commissioned to come to the US by Pucci, a famous designer. She was incredibly talented. She was super smart. There were other things I learned about her. We shared so much, our love of music. We shared our love of motorcycles. There's a great story about that. But I kept her at arm's length because, with the love, there comes pain, and I didn't want to feel it. I wanted to keep her at arm's length because also I was afraid of getting too close, catching it, whatever we want to call it. My little sister, same kind of thing, treating her, because I was the primary caregiver, that's all I could focus on. So I no longer was a sister. I no longer was a daughter. I was, to be honest, the warden, and the fearful, just the fearful person who thought they were they and I was me, and we didn't share anything, and I was super wrong about that.
Wow. I remember the scene about you going with Beth to out country dancing in Brooklyn,
yes,
Iowa.
Yes, Brooklyn, Iowa.
And you find out Beth's mom's favorite song.
Yes.
And you're like, wait a minute, do I know my mom's favorite song?
Yeah. It was really interesting because, so my roommate in college, her name is Beth. She was the very thing that I did not want to room with. Again, my own kind of stereotypes, my own prejudices, but the last thing I wanted to room with was a jock. And lo and behold, in she walks, and she's the real deal. Not a weekend warrior, but someone for whom athletics is super important. What ended up happening, we became really good friends, and we shared things that I didn't think we would have shared. So, Beth could eat me under the table. I mean, it was a very big kind of connection in terms of us actually having a love for food and, humor. She was incredibly funny. And so the part about the jock thing was just like one other little thing about her. No, we didn't share it, but it didn't matter. So Beth's mom, I ended up going home with them when I couldn't make it all the way to Chicago. And Beth's mom was at the local bar, and they were playing music. They were playing Dire Straits. And she was dancing to it, and Beth said something like, oh, that's her favorite song. And it just hit me that I didn't know my mom's favorite song. And I wondered, would my mom go out and enjoy herself like Beth's mom? Later on in the book, I realized that my mom was just like any other mom or any other person. She, of all things, my mother loved who I love, which is Rod Stewart. One of her favorite songs was Do You Think I'm Sexy, which is hilarious if you knew my mom. She also loved her ultimate song was Bohemian Rhapsody. Queen is my favorite band. Those little kind of things came out. And also, serendipitously, she happened to get an opportunity to go with my brother to see Phantom of the Opera. I just figured, you know, she'd go and come back, and typical mom, she'd be like, it was all right. You know, she came back, Energizer Bunny, wanted to talk about the whole thing, just was completely aglow and excited over having seen it. Again, all of those kind of added up to me realizing this was a whole person. This was someone where mental illness was just a tiny fraction of it. And I attempted to focus on the rest.
Great. Thank you. So in this book, you give the critical, cynical, and self-deprecating internal voices in your head a lot of ink, which I loved, and I thought it was a great
way to put it.
Yeah, I felt like they were almost characters in the book.
They're loud.
And I just thought that was awesome. I wanted to ask you what inspired you to give these internal critical voices so much ink.
So it's kind of funny because in my writing, and I don't know how to explain this without coming across very crazy, but in my writing, sometimes the characters or the thing I'm writing about pushes back and tells me what they want to say, how they want to say it, how they want to be presented. I remember I was writing a story once. It actually won an award. It's called 9 Lives and Counting. And it was the story of a little cat, a Sicilian mom, blah, blah, blah. And at the end, I wrote something about the whodunit. And when I wrote it, I remember going, no way. And I know it sounds kind of cuckoo, right? But that's what happens. In this case, when I was going through my journals, when I was reading and revisiting my past, there were times when I would read the journal and be like, who said that? Wait, excuse me. And then I realized it was me and the voices in my head. So you're right. They are their own characters. And the scary part is, you know, growing up and even now, we all have voices in our head, right? Telling us you're not enough, telling us you're too fat, whatever they're telling us. Hopefully sometimes they're telling us you are a rock star, but that's what we have Brenda for. But we always have these voices. And I think though, when you have a parent or someone who is mentally ill, specifically schizophrenia, and has those voices coming through, it is natural for you to fear, wait a minute, is this quote unquote normal? Is this something else? So that's kind of where we're at.
Mm-hmm. Great. One of the other things I loved, besides the voices, was all the letters from back home. Yeah. So here you are in Iowa getting these letters from back home, from your dad, from your mom, from your siblings. Mm-hmm. You're one of 4 siblings. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So first of all, what possessed you to keep those letters? Because that was from 1985. Yeah. And then how was it for you to go back and read those letters after all this time?
Yeah. So I have always loved letters, like the physical, tangible letters, the handwriting. There's something, before I ever even thought about writing, even as a career, whatever, there was something in me that I could not throw those away. I can't tell you why. it's just, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't throw them away. And so they all went into my folders, my journals. Going back and believe me, the ones in the book are like a fraction of what I have. Going back and reading them, first off, I just had this conversation with a friend today, actually, over text. My heart goes out to today's generation because they will only primarily have texts, emails. They will not have those handwritten letters. I mean, every time I hold a letter, I know my father held it, right? My mother held it. There's something, it has its own soul. But going back and reading those letters, sitting in the seat that I am in now. So in other words, there were a lot of things a lot of decisions I made, a lot of choices I made, a lot that happened back then. Those choices, decisions, thoughts were made by either a teenager or a young adult surrounded by the madness. Now, reading those letters, looking back at the journals, there's a tendency, there's often the tendency to judge, right? Well, who you were, what you did back then, based on where you sit now, right? And right now you've got time, distance, perspective, hopefully a little wisdom. And there's a tendency to be like, wow, I can't believe I did that. Wow, what's wrong with me? And, I have learned now, having written 4 books, that you can't do that. You approach the story from where you were sitting during the story. And while these letters, I reread them, and they hit me so much because, like, my mother's especially, when she would send them to me at school, my journals only saw the negative, right? She said this, she said that. I mean, and even when I saw something, like, my mother she wasn't super demonstrative. She even says that she wasn't allowed to show emotion when she was growing up. And she wrote, a salutation of bacioni, which means big kisses. And I thought to myself immediately, what? This isn't my mother. She must be off her meds. Like, immediately that just goes, that's not the case. And so now reading those letters from where I sit, there's just so much more empathy on what she was going through. And yeah, I am super grateful that I have those letters and that connection to the past, and using them to allow the people who wrote them to tell their own story.
Yeah, I love seeing their actual handwriting in the book. That was really nice. In their own language.
In their own language, yeah. It was very, and you could always tell from how they were written, especially my mom, if she was off her meds or if she was a little better, right? Because of how the writing, like, for anyone who has seen, what was that movie, A Beautiful Mind? And he walks into that room, and the whole time you're like, what is going on? Like, you don't realize what's really going on in the story. I don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, but you walk in and the entire room is covered with Post-it notes. And it seems to be one of the symptoms or one of the signs for schizophrenia. It was with my sister, same kind of thing. So anyway.
Great. So for me, the hallmark of a good memoir is how often I laugh or cry. And in your memoir, I did a lot of both.
Yay!
Yeah.
Mission accomplished.
I'm curious, which scene was the most challenging for you to write and why?
Wow. So, gosh, that's a good one, Brenda. So I would say it was incredibly difficult to go back to the moments when my father died, because I was the only one in the house other than my mom, and my mom was ill. And quite honestly, we had so just to set the stage, So in Sicilian folklore, you have a dream of, the person you loved the most who has passed, who has died. And if in your dream they kiss you on the lips, then the myth, the folklore, whatever we want to call it, if they kiss you on the lips, that means that in 3 days, your time is up. So, do we believe this? No, maybe yes. My father didn't necessarily believe it. So one morning, my father always had breakfast with me, and while he's fixing my coffee or whatever, he tells me that he had a dream where his mother, my grandmother, kissed him on the lips, and immediately, you get that feeling of, ugh, this isn't good. And I kind of just said to him, you don't believe in that, do you? No, haha. We just laughed it off. Then I had gone, a couple days, had passed, and I had gone out with friends. I came home that night, and he always waited up for me. And I sat with him. And as I sat with him, in those days, fortunate people had a portable phone that was like the size of a brick, not exactly portable. And it sat like in a cradle. And as I'm talking to my dad, the phone starts to pick up signals and starts chattering. And, and you can hear like bits and pieces of conversations. And my father says, "Oh, he's spiriti," which means, oh, it's the spirits talking. And I laugh. And then I say to him, "Are you afraid to die?" And he's, without skipping a beat, he's like, "No, I've lived a great life. I want to see what's on the other side." And, a very comforting conversation, as much as it was disconcerting. And so he says to me, "Do you want me to come back and tell you what it's like?" And I say, "Well, yes, but don't scare the crap out of me." And so, everybody's kind of laughing. And then the following morning, I am ill, and I am at home when I shouldn't be. My father's laughing. I can hear him with my brother. And, I'm in bed. He says something to me, goes with my mom. And all of a sudden, my mom is calling to me to call 911. And I don't, I didn't even think at all. It was very robotic. And I go make the call, and they asked me if he's still, talking, breathing. And I'm like, yeah, he's still talking. Almost flippant answers. I go back, I get dressed, and then boom, he has fallen. Massive heart attack. He is vomiting from his mouth. I'm, again, the only one there with my mom. We call 911 again while I'm trying to do CPR. And as I'm doing CPR, something pushes me back. Not once, but more than once. And at that moment, I stop. And I'm in a bit of shock, but I'm also kind of thinking through my dad kind of saying he wants to see what's on the other side. And I stop. I mean, I keep, I don't want to say pretending, I keep doing it, but not to the level where, because he was already gone. I mean, to be honest, but to read that all again that one was tough. That was super tough. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And you had a very special relationship with your dad.
Yeah. Very special. Yeah. So yeah, he, when people think of caregiving, when people think of support and family and spouses and significant others, it has always been a concern of mine, because when the going gets tough, the tough get going sometimes out the door and they leave. And my dad at any moment could have just up and gone and left us, but he stuck it out. And he was flawless? No, nobody is. But yeah, he was kind of like that spark of when surrounded by madness, he was the spark who found the magic and taught us how to find it. So for him to be gone, that was huge. Huge.
Wow. Speaking
Yeah.
of magic and madness,
Right.
you're also a book coach.
Yes. So I have taken on, so I have ghostwritten for people, their books. I have co-authored books, and I do book coaching for folks. And I also do resilience and empowerment coaching, but I do it through the use of storytelling. So a lot of people look back at their lives and they make whatever happened mean something, when in reality, what happened. What it means or how it influences you moving forward, that's all up to you. You can go ahead and rewrite that script. So so that's pretty much what I have been doing, especially of late, and I'm actually loving it. On top of writing my own stuff. So
right. That's amazing. What do you wish you would have known before you started your memoir writing that you learned the hard way?
That's a good one. That's a really good question. I think I'm going to say that's the best one so far.
For all the aspiring memoirists
For
out
all
there.
the aspiring memoirists or writers out there, I would say, wow, there's a lot. I would say I wish I had known back then that you're not writing the story you think you're writing. And what do I mean by that? When you are writing a story, any story really, that first draft and whatever's going on in your head, right? I think of my first book, The Tell All, you know what I mean? Pointing those fingers. That's what I thought I was writing. Took me 10 years to get that book out. It's not what I ended up writing. And your stories, we're in such a rush to just go ahead and get them down, get them out the door. At least I know patience is not my strong suit. But letting that story come out, that first draft, Anne Lamott calls it excuse my language, but the first draft. I kind of call it vomiting out the first draft. Just let it flow, let it out, then go back and look at it and decide what is the story, because it will tell you. I wish I had known that when I started. I also, honestly, if I had to do it over again, maybe I would do the same thing, who knows? But right now I'm thinking to myself, I don't think I would have chosen such an important story as my first book. There's a lot that you learn when it comes to writing a book, when it comes to the entire game of publishing, then the game of publicity, all of that. And to do it all with something that's so important to you, so germane to who you are and part of your soul, it heightens the stakes on your very first effort. So I don't know. I might have done things in reverse and done some story that, not that it doesn't matter to you, because every story you write has bits of you, but not something that was so like the S word.
Yeah, that's another really haunting and powerful read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That one was tough.
That one was tough. Yeah.
It was tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It deals with abuse of power. I guess power. What do you call them? Authority figures.
Authority figures.
Authority figures. Yeah.
The church, police, and that's why I'm saying, in the beginning it was a very pointed finger, tell all kind of thing, and at the end of the day, everyone is human. And I'm not excusing anybody, but I'd like to believe that everyone was doing the best they could at that moment. And, fortunately, whatever comes before, you have a choice. You have a choice to have it, get you stuck. You have a choice to, influence you in a negative way or in a positive way. I will say that my longtime therapist, to whom I give credit for even me being here, and I mean that sincerely, she's super brilliant in some of the things she said. And there was a moment during our 10 plus years of therapy together when she finally just said to me, Paolina, when are you going to stop wishing for a better past? It's not going to happen. And whoa, that I know that completely sounds logical, but and it, but it really, that one really flipped a switch.
Rira has appeared. I think she's telling us we should take some questions.
Rira, yeah. So we have time for a couple of quick questions. This one is from Amy. Did your father know something was wrong with your mom or sister?
Did your father know something was wrong with my mom or sister? So with my mom, he knew in the beginning something was wrong. She kept saying her head hurt. It felt like there were spiders in her head. He knew something was wrong. He did what he knew how to do, which take her to the doctor and see what the doctors had to say. He trusted that the directions they were leading him to were correct. And that included exploratory brain surgery. He once it was confirmed that it was psychological, then you become more aware, and the things that maybe you weren't willing to see or even assign to mental illness, then he became aware. My little sister, my father basically was like, you know what? She's a loner. She's lonely. Maybe if she just went to his sister in Sicily for like a change of scenery, right? And, you just need to, goodness, I almost every Monday try to go to the beach because I need a change of scenery. I just need to clear my head. That's what he thought about her. But then slowly you get to know that something's wrong. My father never really saw it in my little sister because she didn't have her psychotic break until after he was already dead.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. So this is from Evan. My dad's childhood friend became a schizophrenic in his late 20s after a period of depression. No one in his family, parents or grandparents, had any mental health issues. Do you believe severe depression can trigger schizophrenia, or is it the other way around?
So I want to make sure that everyone realizes I'm not a member of the medical profession, right? So specifics and answers with data I don't have. What I do know is that schizophrenia often is brought on by something that triggers it. So it can be, they even thought this with my mom that, number one, that she had it in her 20s because that's when it kind of manifests, but she was so smart and so able to keep it hidden that it just got worse and worse and worse without anybody knowing about it. So I would say, and hers, I think her trigger was when my uncle, her brother, who lived with us, died. And when he died, she took on such guilt and kept it all in. That's key here. Silence suffocates. The more that we try to stuff everything down and keep it in, we're not doing ourselves a favor. We're not doing the world a favor. We are just allowing it to fester and get worse. And I think that's what happened in that case. So I'm hoping that kind of answers the question on how I think.
I think that answers the question beautifully. I think that's all we have for now. Thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. It was lovely seeing everyone's comments in the chat. And thank you again, Paolina and Brenda. This was such a fun and wonderful discussion. Again, if you would like to purchase a copy of The Committed, just click on the green purchase button and it'll take you to our website where you can complete your purchase. And for those who tuned in late, don't worry. A replay of this talk will be available shortly after the broadcast ends. And we'll try to upload this onto our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So that's another way you can rewatch this talk. And I think that about covers it. Thank you again, Paolina and Brenda. And have a good night, everyone.
And if you could buy the book and write an Amazon review, I'd love you for it. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.